Most people think owning a $500,000 house means you've made it. It doesn't. It usually means you signed up for a very expensive cosplay called middle-class success. You've seen it happen. Keys in hand, smiles on Instagram, blessed. Then quietly something shifts. Money gets tense, conversations tighten. Every expense suddenly needs a reason. They didn't buy freedom, they bought silence. Let's break the illusion once, with math, and then never touch it again. A $500,000 house in 2026 usually means putting down about $100,000 if they want to look responsible. That leaves a $400,000 mortgage. Add property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and maybe an HOA. All in, the payment quietly lands around $3,500 to $4,000 a month. To carry that without constantly feeling exposed, the household generally needs $180,000 to $220,000 a year, consistently. Not, this year went well, consistently. Most people buying these houses don't make that. They just make enough to qualify. Qualification isn't wealth, it's tolerance for pressure. Now the patterns show up. Sign 1. They don't need the house to feel successful. The people who can afford a $500,000 house aren't emotionally attached to owning one. The ones who aren't can't wait. They talk about timelines, about being behind, about how everyone else is buying. The house isn't shelter, it's proof. Proof they're winning, proof they're adults, proof they didn't mess up their life. So they stretch, they justify. They say things like, it's an investment, while their stomach quietly knots up. When someone needs the house to feel successful, they overpay. They ignore risk. They accept payments that quietly own them. They don't buy a home, they buy reassurance. The people who can actually afford it don't talk like that. They say things like, I could buy now or later. That sentence alone filters out most buyers. If losing the house would shatter their identity, they never owned it. Because real affordability includes psychological margin, not just math. If the house is carrying their ego is carrying the mortgage. Sign 2. Their income isn't the star of the show. High income doesn't mean house ready. Stable income does. People hear, you need to make $150,000 to afford a $500,000 house, and relax the moment they hit the number. They celebrate. They stop asking questions. They forget to ask the only one that matters. How fragile is this income? Bonuses, commissions, overtime, side hustles that depend on energy, relevance, or perfect conditions. These look great on paper. Lenders love them. Life eventually doesn't. People who can afford a $500,000 house usually have boring money, predictable money, money that shows up even when they're sick, tired, or replaceable. If income needs perfect conditions to exist, the house eventually feels like a threat. Real affordability means the mortgage gets paid by income that doesn't need chasing. If a paycheck needs motivation, the house eventually needs prayer. Sign 3. They're not maxing out what the bank approved. Bank approval is not permission. It's a test. Someone gets approved for $520,000 and proudly shops at $520,000. Because why wouldn't they use the full amount? It feels logical, efficient, adult. What they don't realize is the bank isn't asking, will this hurt? They're asking, can we still get paid if it does? People who can afford a $500,000 house often buy below their max, sometimes far below, because they understand something subtle. Flexibility is wealth. They want room for mistakes, job changes, burnout, boredom, regret, opportunity. Maxing out approval is how a house turns into a cage with nice countertops. The bank lent them a leash. They decided how tight to pull it. Sign 4. Their lifestyle didn't inflate with the zip code. The house wasn't the beginning of an upgrade era. For most people it is. New house, new furniture, new neighborhood, new car, new address, new expectations. Suddenly they're hosting, renovating, matching, keeping up. Each expense feels justified, individually, quietly, like ants carrying away margin. People who can afford the house don't let it rewrite their identity. They don't feel pressure to look like they belong. They already do. They furnish slowly. They skip upgrades. They don't chase aesthetic validation. Because the real cost of the house isn't the mortgage, it's the lifestyle gravity that follows. The house didn't drain them. The desire to perform inside it did. Sign 5. The mortgage is boring compared to their cash flow. If the payment dominates their thoughts, they can't afford it. People say, it's tight now, but it'll get easier. Sometimes it does. Often it doesn't. Expenses grow. Life intervenes. Optimism quietly becomes obligation. For people who can afford a $500,000 house, the mortgage is just another line item, not a daily emotional presence, not a recurring stress thought. They can miss a month of income and not panic. They can fix a roof without debt gymnastics. They don't need perfect months to survive. If the mortgage requires constant discipline, constant restraint, constant sacrifice, that's not ownership. That's survival with granite countertops. If a house makes someone hustle harder, it owns them. Sign 6. They had a life before the house. The house wasn't their first big financial decision. This is where most people quietly fail. Many buyers treat the house like the starting line. First asset, first real commitment, first time being responsible. Everything before it was flexible, forgivable. That's backwards. People who can afford a $500,000 house usually had money systems before it. Not perfect ones, just practiced ones. Savings habits, emergency buffers, investment muscle memory. They've already experienced boring months, already sat with cash without immediately spending it, already watched money fluctuate without panicking. They learned how money behaves under stress, before tying themselves to a structure they can't easily escape. The house becomes an addition to a stable system, not the system itself. If the house is the foundation, it's sitting on dirt. Sign 7. They could walk away and still be fine. True affordability includes exit power. Most buyers never consider leaving. They assume permanence, forever home, long-term, stability. All comforting words that quietly remove leverage. People who can afford the house could sell it, rent it, or walk away without their life collapsing. They aren't emotionally cornered. They didn't chain their identity to one structure, one market, one decision. When someone can leave, they sleep better. They negotiate better. They live lighter. If they can't leave, it isn't shelter. It's a contract with gravity. Here's the hard truth. Most people didn't buy a $500,000 house because it made sense. They bought it because not buying it felt like falling behind. They didn't want shelter. They wanted to stop being evaluated. And approval is the most expensive thing people ever finance. The house doesn't reveal who's rich. It reveals who paid to silence the comparison. Stickman out.